Hello everyone, welcome to this session on tips for cracking AWS interview. So today in this session we have some people on our GoToWebinar, right? So they can ask me questions directly, and for the rest of you, you are seeing this live on YouTube. So if you have any questions, guys, you can just put it in the live chat replay box, and my team is here to help you out. They'll be answering all your questions, right? So like I said, guys, we'll be discussing some of the tips that you can follow if you want to make a shift to the cloud domain, right? And primarily if you are learning AWS and if you want an AWS job, how do you go about for preparing it, right? So let's go ahead and start off. So like I said, guys, for the people who go to webinar, they can ask me questions and I would be able to see the answers over here, right? So I can see that I have a question from Bhanu. Can you please provide the recording of this session? Sure, Bhanu. So this session is being recorded. You can just reach out to our support team and they would be happy to give you the recording for this session too. Okay, moving forward, guys, now let's start with the first slide, which basically would talk about some of the frequently asked interview questions, or some of the frequently asked questions about uh, the AWS jobs or the jobs in the cloud domain itself. What are the some frequently asked questions by people, which or for people like who are there in this session today with us? What are some questions that you can ask me while I'm talking about the cloud engineer profile? Let's discuss that. So the number one question that I get when usually I address some people who are wanting to learn cloud is, I am from some X background. And this X background could be anything, right? It could be that I am from finance background, I'm from banking background, I am from IT background, I'm from non-IT background, I'm from programming background, I'm from database background, could be anything, right? So I am from X background, can I learn and shift to the AWS domain, right? So if you can see, I also have questions. I have a question from Akanksha. She says, I'm a database admin with an experience of 5 years. Will shifting to AWS help me? And I've got some other questions as well. So guys, I would be answering all those questions one by one, but as you can see, I just got a question which I was discussing here, that I am from X background and can I learn and shift to AWS? So the answer is yes, guys. It doesn't matter which background you're from. If you want to learn AWS or if you have decided you want to shift to the cloud industry, no one is stopping you to do that, right? But obviously you'll have to do your homework. Now, if you want to learn AWS, let me tell you some prerequisites that you might have to follow. So the number one thing is that you should be good with handling a computer. You should know like how to go to any particular website. You should know how to go to AWS. So this is the very basic stuff that you should know. So if you are someone who has never held computer in his hand before, I would request you all that first we need to learn some basics about the IT, how IT works and how the machines that we'll work on they work, and then we can go ahead. So probably I will say people who have a background on computers, the current job that they're doing, if it's on computers, AWS would, or you can actually go ahead and learn AWS. But for people who are very new to computers and then they have heard about shifting to the cloud domain, I would not recommend you that. But yes, so if you have a desk job wherein you've been working on computers, I guess you people can actually start off with cloud and understand what it is. And the way you will have to start off is, first you will have to learn about cloud computing, right? So cloud computing in its most basic sense, like if I were to tell you what cloud computing is in its most basic sense, it's the use of remote servers on the internet to do your work, right? So instead of having your own laptop or your own computer with a specific RAM or a specific processor, you can actually launch a higher spec machine on the cloud and use it for your own work while not buying it, while not investing on it. You can actually rent that particular server and then you can work on it. That is in its most basic sense cloud computing. And what AWS is a company which basically provides you this kind of a service. So now when you start learning AWS, you will basically start to learn about different services. You'll learn about compute services. You'll learn about database services. So obviously you'll have to learn about each of those services. But like I said, it doesn't matter if you don't know how to use those services. For example, let's say you are a person who would be uh, you know creating an architecture for a particular application which is probably on mean stack. Let's say you're using Mongo, you're using Angular, you're using Node.js for that application, and you have to create the architecture for it. So I, as an architect, would just have to know how to create an architecture which will never go down, which can auto scale according to its needs. But I need not know about the mean stack application. I need not know about Node.js. I need not know about MongoDB. I need not know about Angular. That is something that I don't have to know about. What I just have to know about are AWS architect principles and how to obviously implement an architecture that I've just created. Right? On, let's say, pen and paper, I've created an architecture. How to implement it in the AWS management console, that is something that I will learn while I am shifting to the cloud domain. And that is what exactly the kind of skills that companies are also looking for. So if you are from an X background, and if you can relate to this, if you think this is something that you can actually work on, AWS is something that you can actually shift on, right? The second most frequently asked question that I get is which AWS certification to choose. Now, this is a very important question, right? So primarily when we talk about AWS, there are three kind of certifications to choose from. You have the architect certification, you have the developer certification, and then you have the admin certification or exam, right? So the first question that we discussed, that I am from X background, I was basically focusing on the AWS architect exam and not the admin and developer exam. And the reason for that is the admin and the developer exam are basically core exams that someone takes. Okay, what do I mean by core exams? If you're already an administrator on some particular operating system or on some particular platform and you want to move onto AWS, right, but you still want to be an administrator, then you would go ahead and do the AWS administrator, that is a SysOps certification and exam. If you are already a developer and you want to become a developer who can develop applications for AWS infrastructure, right, then you will go ahead and give and crack the AWS developer exam, right? But let's say you are a developer who want to let's say get promoted. You have like 5 or 6 years down your belt, and you now are thinking about probably becoming a CTO of some company or something like that. In those kind of scenarios, you can go ahead and become an AWS architect, right? Or for people who are new to the IT domain or who are new to the cloud domain and they do not have the database and developer experience, but they still want to be in the cloud domain, then also for you, I would recommend the AWS architect certification, right? On those lines, I have some questions. Let's see what those questions are. So I have a question from Pranay. Isn't it hard to find purely AWS architect profile job? Usually companies expect architect plus dev profile or DevOps profile along with architect certification. Good question, Pranay, and I would be covering this particular question in my upcoming frequently asked questions, because that is also a part of today's discussion. Okay, so let's now go ahead and talk about how much salary can I earn once I have learned AWS. So Akanksha asked me this question that she wants her salary, her current salary is 5 LPA. She wants to shift her salary to 10 LPA. So how can she do that with AWS? And most of you who are basically looking out to shift in the AWS domain, you also might have this question that how much salary can I have or can I earn once I have learned or once I have cracked the exams for AWS? How much salary can I earn? Now, guys, the answer for this is no particular number. I cannot quote you a number that this is the amount that you can earn. But there are 2 or 3 scenarios that you can look at and then judge as to how much salary you can get. Let's say you are a complete fresher. You're fresh out of college. You don't know about any IT processes, right? And you start off with the AWS certifications, you crack it, and now you're looking out for a job which is basically a junior architect or AWS engineer kind of job, which you will get. So there are jobs which can range from 5.5 to, let's say, 10 lakhs. So this is the range in which you can lie. So why is this such a huge range? So depending on what all skills you bring to the table, that also basically can evaluate what kind of salary you will get. Let's say you are a very good developer, right? And from college you've learned a lot of development, you've done a lot of projects, and you've also done the AWS certification. So in those kind of scenarios, you can get a salary which is upwards of 10 lakhs. But let's say you're not that good at programming, but you're very good at AWS. So in those kind of scenarios, you can get somewhere around 5.5 to 6 lakhs of salary. That is the starting salary. And obviously, as you get experience, you can also build on that and get more salary, get hike, change your job, change your company, and get more hike on that. Now, how much salary can I earn? Like, let's say you are an experienced guy, right? Let's say you have around 5 or 6 years of experience, but you are from the non-IT background, okay? Let's say you're from the banking domain. Now you have learned AWS and you want to shift to the cloud domain and you want to know how much salary you can get. Now, guys, if you are from some X domain, which is, let's say, the non-IT domain, and now you have shifted to AWS, the way you will be able to, or you will be relating your past experience with your current profile is, let's say you are from finance background. Okay, so now what happens is some finance company you found online which wants to implement their finance processes which they are implementing using IT to be done on the AWS infrastructure rather than their on-prem infrastructure or whatever the case be. They want to use AWS for their financial processes. Now, obviously, the person who would be needed in this, he would have to know AWS through and through. He would have to understand AWS through and through. But for that particular company, that particular finance company, it will be an added advantage if you also understand the financial processes, right? And with that, you are not only using your past experience, but you're also increasing the chances of getting a higher package, right? So for those kind of scenarios, when you're from a non-IT background, you would have to do a little of job hunt. You would have to find a relevant company for you where you can not only use your past experience, but also use the experience of what you have just learned, that is using AWS. Now let's talk about the third category, right? The third category are people who are from the IT background, who were developers, who were administrators, they have now become architects, or who are people who have around 10 or 15 years of experience in the IT domain. They have done the certification. Now, how much salary can you guys expect? Right? So guys, the starting for you guys, let's say you're a 15 years senior guy who was into development, who understands technology stack pretty well, and you've also added AWS under your skills, right? So you can easily earn up to a package. I know a guy who earns around 40 lakhs a year, right? And obviously he just doesn't know AWS, he knows a couple of other things as well, right? But this is the upward limit of how much you can earn. I mean, that is a person, that particular person is a person that I have heard about who is in the AWS or is in the cloud domain and who's earning this much. When we talk about the starting salary for you guys, it totally depends on what kind of experience you're bringing to the table, right? So if you're a 15 years experienced guy and whatever domain that you were working in, you have done pretty well over there, and now you have also added AWS into your skills. So whatever your current salary is, the minimum you can get a hike is up to 30 or 40%. Right? What can the maximum be? The maximum can be actually sky is the limit, right? Whatever skills you can showcase, according to that, you can get a salary. Now, that brings us to a very important question, which is our next question. So, learning AWS, is it enough for getting a job into the cloud domain? And this was also a question which was just been asked by, a friend. So, Pranay, he basically asked, isn't it hard to find purely AWS architect profile, right? So, companies also expect you to know a certain other skills. So, how can we do that? So I also have a question from Shubham that he's from a non-IT background, and will AWS help him? So I answered your question, Shubham. So AWS would definitely help you, but it all depends on with how much dedication, with how much skills that you gather in the time that you're learning AWS, and also how well you can relate your past experience with the current company that you will be applying to, that would depend on how much AWS would be helpful to you, right? So the question over here is learning AWS alone enough for a cloud job role that you're looking out for? Now, guys, when you search for job profiles in cloud, you would find profiles like release manager, you would find profiles like cloud engineers, you will find profile like uh, cloud developer, right? These are all the kind of profiles that you will get on the internet. Now, as rightly pointed out by Pranav, they do not just expect AWS out of you, they also expect development, they also expect DevOps, they also expect certain other skills as well. But it's not like there are no jobs which purely judges you on AWS too. There are jobs like that. For example, if you talk about the role of a cloud support engineer in Amazon, right? So the Amazon company who has developed the AWS platform, they also offer jobs like cloud support engineer, right? So for those cloud support engineer profiles, they just expect you to know AWS through and through, and obviously some operating system and some networking concepts, which are actually a part of when you're learning AWS. So are there any jobs which purely require AWS? Yes, there are jobs out there. But if you are aiming for a higher package, let's say somewhere around 20 or somewhere around 16 lakhs, then obviously AWS will just not be enough. You would also have to, look out for learning the other skills which are mentioned in the job description. Now, what are the other skills? Like I said, they would expect you to know at least one programming language. The programming language, if you want me to answer that question for you, which programming language should I start with? You can either start with Python, or you can also start with, C++ or C. It doesn't matter. You just have to start with one programming language and you have to learn it through and through. When I say through and through, all the basic concepts like looping, if statements, and then flow control of the program, all these things, if you get to learn, I think that would be enough for you to basically get a job with the skill of having one programming language under your belt. Other than that, they also expect you to know DevOps processes. They expect you to know tools like Chef. They expect you to learn tools like Puppet. So these are all DevOps tools, and obviously, when you are deploying applications to cloud, you would require a process to also deliver applications from the developer to the servers that are there which you have deployed on AWS. And this particular process is known as DevOps. So when you aim for a higher package, they also expect you to know DevOps, they also expect you to know AWS, and at the same time, they also expect you to know a programming language. Apart from these, some companies also expect you to know, apart from AWS, they will also expect you to know Azure, they will also expect you to know GCP. And the reason for that is simply that none of the companies, they basically are reliant on one cloud provider. Let's say AWS, it fails somehow in the future. Let's say after 1 year or so, it basically takes in a blackout wherein it's not available for, let's say, 3 or 4 hours. If that is the case and you are solely dependent on AWS, even your application will go down for 3-4 hours, and that means a huge business loss, because when we talk about product-based companies, all they earn with is their product. And if their product goes down, that means the servers that it is deployed on goes down, they will suffer a huge loss. So what companies these days do is they not only deploy their applications on a primary cloud provider such as AWS, but they also deploy their applications on cloud providers like Azure, cloud providers like GCP, and that's how they manage their infrastructure. And obviously, if they need a profile or a person like a cloud engineer, they would expect him to know all the three cloud providers which are number one in the industry right now, which are AWS, Azure, and GCP. Right? So the question, learning AWS is enough for a cloud engineer role? It depends. What kind of role are you applying for? The cloud support engineer role that I just mentioned for the Amazon company, the starting package for that job is around 10.5 lakhs, which I think is pretty decent for a person who has, let's say, around 5 lakhs or 6 lakhs. If you learn AWS, if you prepare for that profile, I think it would be great. For people who are from the IT background and they want to learn AWS, right? You guys can actually aim for a higher package, because not only your earlier skills will help you, but when you try to learn AWS, you would also be able to relate to the experience that you have gathered. You would able to relate, and you would also be able to think of architectures which can actually solve problems that you were facing earlier, right? And that is the reason you also get paid higher when you apply for jobs. Okay, so these were some frequently asked questions, guys, with respect to AWS. Now let's move on and talk about how actually can you prepare for the AWS interviews, right? So let's say uh, I've told you about all the things that you can do actually, but how do you prepare for an AWS interview, right? So let's go ahead and see that. So I've noted down some tips which you can actually follow to start applying for AWS jobs. So the number one, the most important thing that you have to do is you'll have to prepare a resume which the hiring managers can take a notice of. It doesn't matter if you have a certification or not. Even if you have a certification, if you have not listed it properly in your resume, the hiring managers would not be able to shortlist you for a job. Now, how do you prepare your resumes? So the first thing that you do is you'll go to any job portal, search for the profile that you want to apply for, and then just go through all the job descriptions which you see on the first page. So whatever skills that you see there, those skills are basically keywords that you have to add in your resume, right? So add those skills in your resume, add those keywords in your resume. And the way the hiring manager works is they have a tool, they have a job job portal tool, in which they just search for the skills that they are looking for out in a guy. They hit enter and they get all the resumes which are related to it, right? So if you want to be in that list which the hiring managers are basically looking out for, you will have to put those keywords in your resume. This is step number one, very important. It doesn't matter if you don't know those skills, add it in your resume. Why? Because this is we are starting off in the journey of cloud. It doesn't mean the first interview that you go to, you have to crack that interview, right? It doesn't mean that. First, you have to take in the experience, you have to talk to people, you have to see how that interview experience is. You add all the skills which are there, add it in your resume, and obviously, we'll also start learning those skills as we move along also. But don't stop with these interviews. Go on and keep going, giving the interviews, so that you get a feel of how questions are asked. The second important thing is, guys, whatever questions which are asked to you in the interview, keep a note of them, right? Because what I've seen in this IT industry is most of the interviews that you give, and if it's for a particular profile, probably at one point you'll realize all the hiring managers or all the people who are taking your interviews, they kind of ask the same type of questions, right? So it's a very important task to basically list down all the questions that a particular hiring manager is asking you, right? And do that for every interview that you sit for. This will help you a lot when you have a question bank, and before going to that any interview that you have to crack, you just have to go through that question bank to basically memorize whatever you have learned. Okay, so I have a question. So Bhanu says no voice. So Bhanu, I think there is some problem with your connection. Just check your connection once. I think that would solve it. Okay, this was tip number one, guys. Now let's move on to tip number two. So build skills by doing projects. Now, whatever skills you have mentioned in your resume, obviously you'll also have to work on it, and you just don't have to work on it by reading it online or understanding the theoretical concepts of it. You can only learn those skills, truly master the skills, only if you do projects. Now, these could be any kind of projects. These could be pseudo projects that you have thought of, while you were thinking about how the AWS infrastructure could be in production. You can also go through a lot of white papers that AWS has given you, wherein they suggest production architectures, or they suggest ways of using AWS on the production system. Go through those architectures, implement an application, and implement the skills that you had mentioned in your resume in step number one, right? This is how you would not only learn those skills, but also once you're done with the project, you can just upload it on any code hosting website such as GitHub, and then you can add it, that link of that project, you can add it in your resume and show it to your prospective boss, showing that, I may not have the kind of experience in AWS, real-time experience, but what I've done is I've done some projects which have these skills that you want in the job. And if you want to have a look at those projects, it's available on my GitHub. You can have a look. Right, so this is something which is very important. You don't read the skills, you don't learn the skills, you do the skills by implementing projects, and you also mention that in your resume. This is step number 2. Then you have step number 3. Network with the present cloud engineers or the people who are working in the cloud domain. Right, we are in an era where we are on the internet all the time. Right, so you are on LinkedIn, you are on other professional networks, websites. Get in touch with people who are in the cloud domain. It could be that most of the people would not accept your invitations. It could be that most of the people might ignore your requests which are sitting in their profiles, but it is okay. If you apply, or if you send requests, like let's say around 100 people, at least you will get 5 or 6 people who will accept your request. Out of those 5-6 people, if you send message to all of them, at least one will reply, who would be ready to help you out in your journey of cloud that you want to start. Ask for help, ask for opinions, give them your resume, ask them what do you think about your resume, right? Ask about what all skills they can add to your resume, what all things you can learn. So network with the present cloud engineers, network with the present people who are in the cloud domain, and out of 100, I can guarantee you there'll be 10 people who would be ready to help you out, right? So this is a very important step. Again, network with the right set of people, and don't give up. Don't give up on giving interviews, right? I have friends who have given around 100 plus interviews to land in a certain job that they wanted, but it was their dream job. It was the kind of work that they wanted to do. It took the perseverance, it took the effort, and they gave that effort, right? Nobody in this world can guarantee you a job just after you have learned a particular technology stack. It takes interviews, it takes experience, it takes time to get to know what the industry expects, and keep working on those skills. Whatever you hear in the interview, whatever people try to ask you, learn. Go to the interview with the intent of not getting hired, but with the intent of learning, right? And I'm pretty sure, right, if we talk about MNCs, or if we talk about mid-sized companies, if they have listed 100 skills that they need for a particular profile, and let's say you're good with 50 also, right? But the 50 skills that you're good at are like extremely awesome, right? That is the kind of skillfulness that you have in those particular skill set. So if that is the case, they will hire you, because they know, let's say you don't know the other 50 skills, but with the experience of the first 50 skills that you know properly, they can just give you some time, and then you would be actually go on with the other skills which are left out, and also master them, right? So if you tell your recruiter that I know these 5 things, but I know them in depth, you can ask me anything from it, and if they recognize that, they would not stop themselves from putting a bet on you whether you can actually perform in the company or not. This actually happens. It is very difficult to basically get people who are skilled in all the technologies which are out there, and hence companies, what they do is they mention all the skills that they need from a particular person in the job description. And even if a person knows around 60% of those skills, but he knows them in depth, they get hired, right? This is how the companies are actually operating these days. Okay, so I have a question. So Akanksha is asking me, okay, so this is a technical question. What is the difference between Elastic Beanstalk and AWS Lambda, right? So with this question, I can imagine, Akanksha, you are actually learning AWS. So it's a pretty good question, and I think, this question might be there for a lot of people who start learning AWS. So guys, Elastic Beanstalk is nothing but it's basically an application on which you can upload an application which is a front-end application, and this particular service, which is Elastic Beanstalk, basically helps you in deploying applications. Okay, When you compare it with AWS Lambda, AWS Lambda is basically a backend service. So whatever code you throw at AWS Lambda, it can execute that code and give an output to you, right? But Elastic Beanstalk is a service which helps you in deploying applications. AWS Lambda is a service which helps you in executing code. So this is the main difference between the two. So if you have to deploy a website, which service to choose? Elastic Beanstalk. If you have a pretty big chunk of code which takes hours and hours to process, where would you put it? Elastic Beanstalk or AWS Lambda? AWS Lambda. If a code takes, let's say, 0.2 seconds to execute, AWS Lambda. If it's backend, if it's not related to deploying applications, it's taking an input, it's giving an output, that could be done on AWS Lambda. If you have an application which needs to be deployed, that for that the application that you need is Elastic Beanstalk. Okay, so guys, this is the difference between Elastic Beanstalk and AWS Lambda. And guys, this is it for the tips that I had to give you for going and preparing for the cloud engineer role. Now guys, if you think you want to go for the cloud engineer role or the cloud domain, like I said, there is no one stopping you from doing it, but you'll have to put in the efforts if you are from a different background and you are going to the cloud domain. And even if you are from the IT background and you are looking for some growth, don't think just learning AWS would be enough. You would have to learn a host of other things, but this is how actually it works. This is how the other people that are there in the industry who are making shifts in their jobs are also doing it, right? And don't get bogged down by getting rejected in interviews. It is totally okay and it is totally normal. This is a life cycle which everyone goes through, right? Anybody who's trying to find a job, he gets rejected at 100 places, and after that 100th interview you get so matured that you actually try to understand what companies are looking for, and you actually start to prepare according to that. So to have that kind of positive mindset when you're going for an interview, don't go to an interview to get the job, go to an interview to basically learn something, and this will take you a long way. So with that guys, I thank you all for attending today's session. I hope this session was useful to you. Now as always guys, if you want to learn these skills that we talked about, that you have to learn DevOps, you have to learn cloud, you have to learn some programming language, right? Either you can learn it yourself or you can actually go ahead and learn with us. So we at Intellipaat, we actually offer a course which is the Cloud and DevOps Architect Masters course. So if I were to show you guys, I'll just go to a new tab. Let me go to intellipaat.com. And on intellipaat.com, all you have to do is search for Cloud and DevOps. And when you search for this, you will get a page which will basically take you to the Cloud and DevOps Architect Masters course. This is the course. Just click on that and you will find all the course details on this particular master's page, right? So we give you AWS, we train you on Azure, we train you on DevOps, Python, Google Cloud. We also offer you a bunch of other skills as well, which is basically in form of self-paced training. So you can learn it on your own pace. That is the meaning of self-paced. These are recorded sessions. Online classroom training basically means that we have people who are from the cloud domain, who are cloud engineers, top cloud engineers, and working in the Fortune 500 companies, who exactly know as to what kind of skills companies look out for. So these people would be training you in the online classroom training, and they'd be training you in all these skills which I mentioned over here, right? So why do we have a course which is basically a combination of all these skills? The reason for that is we offer it at a discounted rate. So Intellipaat is giving you this all set of courses for this particular price. So if you are interested, you can go ahead and actually buy this course. And if you are watching this session today, you can actually get an additional discount on this mentioned price over here by mentioning the code YouTube30 at the time of purchasing your code. If you do that, you will additionally get a discount of 30% on whatever price has been mentioned on the day of your purchase. Okay, so I have a question from Pranay. He's saying Azure is catching up at very fast pace. So why still AWS is being emphasized a lot? Isn't too many people skilled in AWS, make others provide like Azure and GCP better choice. So Pranay, you're absolutely right. Azure is catching up at a very fast pace. But if you compare, the market size of AWS and Azure, so AWS has a market size of around 32% of the whole cloud domain, right? So 33% of the whole cloud domain is actually occupied by AWS. And if you compare it with Azure, Azure has a market size of around 12 to 16%. Right, so even if they are growing at a very alarming or a very fast rate, it'll take some time to basically come at par with AWS. Now, why do I suggest people to learn AWS first? The reason for that, or why do I emphasize on learning AWS first, is because the moment you get skilled in AWS, the kind of jobs that you can apply to, they are more as compared to when you learn Azure, right? And I'm not talking just in air. You can actually go to Indeed and you can check out, just type in cloud engineer, and you will actually see all the job descriptions will have AWS mentioned in it. Some also will have Azure in it, and after that, a lesser number will also have GCP in it. But there will be no job description which just says, that you have to just know Azure, or you just have to know GCP, or you have to know Azure and GCP. AWS for sure would be there. And if in case there are some job descriptions, if you go by the percentage, I think 98% of the jobs which are related to cloud would expect you to know AWS. Some 2% would just be working on Azure, but the rest, all the companies are working with AWS along with Azure and GCP. That is also the case, right? So I hope that answers your question. So that is the reason we emphasize on AWS, because obviously you have to learn Azure, you have to learn GCP also. But if you learn AWS first, the chances of you giving interviews to companies would be more than, when you just learn Azure. Okay, so that is one thing that I would like to ask. Prashant is saying, do we get the recorded video? Of course, Prashant, you would get the recorded video. You can just drop a mail to support@intellipaat.com and they'll send you the link for this recorded video. I hope that answers your question. Okay, so with this, guys, I thank you a lot for attending today's session. If you have any further questions, like I said, in the chat box, my colleague would be sending you all the numbers that you can call on. Or if you're still viewing this session, you can actually call on this particular number, which is 7022-374-614 for Indian customers, and all for our US customers, you can call on this number 1800-216-8930, and we'll get in touch with you. If you want to drop us a mail, we also are available on sales@intellipaat.com. Okay. So Pranay is saying, please tell us something about the job assistance program by Intellipaat. So Pranay, basically the job assistance program that we offer, in that we help you in building your resume. So like I said, your resume should have all the right keywords so that, the hiring managers can pick them up, and you can be called for an interview round. So that is something that we help you out with. Also, since we are a training company, we are associated with 100 plus companies, MNCs, Fortune 500 companies whom we train. So these companies, basically, they're always looking out for people who are skilled in a particular profile, because they also get their internal employee skilled. And if they get a ready-made employee who knows all the skills that they're actually training their internal workforce for, it's pretty good for them. So what they do is they constantly ask us, when I mean us, I mean Intellipaat, whether they have these kind of people who know these skill sets. And what we do is we refer the resumes that we have to them, right? So we don't guarantee a job placement from our side, but what we do is we help you with resume building, which will obviously improve the chances of you getting interview calls. And we also float your resumes to all these companies who ask us for the requirements. So that is the job assistance program which Intellipaat offers. I hope that answers your question. Okay. So with this, guys, let's conclude today's session. So if you have any further questions, like I said, you can call us on the numbers displayed on the screen, or you can also email us, and we'd be happy to answer all the questions. Okay, so with that said, guys, I hope this session was useful to you. I'll see you in some other session. Have a great day ahead, and goodbye.